Welcome to the Marvel Alliance podcast, where we cover anything and everything to do with the Marvel Universe. From comics, TV, and movies, we will go from the Mojoverse to Earth 616 to the Bedford Savant apartments in Brooklyn, New York, to bring the Marvel Universe right to you. I'm the Uncanny Chris.
I'm the friendly neighborhood Brent.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I'm Sean. I guess I'm the guest.
And we have special guest Sean.
Special guest Sean. Those nicknames; those are great.
Yeah, Alliance,
Assemble.
Well, yes, welcome to volume 74. 74. We're almost to that magic number 75. And how are you doing tonight, Brent?
I cannot complain. It's been a good week. Can't complain. Work's going well. Pretty smooth. We're on our next big project, and it's off to a good start. So, I'm good. What about you?
I'm doing good. Got actually a productive work week. Doing what I do at that point. Sometimes weeks can be a lot of stuff getting behind, but yeah, it was productive. And as you all have heard, we have a special guest joining us. So it is Sean O'Connell. He is the managing director of Cinema Blend, co-host of the Real Blend podcast, and published his first book this year, released the Snyder Cut, the crazy true story behind the fight that saved Zack Snyder's Justice League. And he is currently in the middle of wrapping up writing his new book, With Great Power, How Spider-Man Conquered Hollywood During the Golden Age of Comic Book Blockbusters. And so he is joining us tonight to talk as much as he can about this book, but welcome, Sean, to this podcast, and we really appreciate you joining us tonight.
I am thrilled to be with you guys. I'm a huge Marvel fan. I can geek out about Marvel for hours. So let's dive in. Let's talk about all the fun stuff.
Oh, yeah, that's what we're doing. So we got some network plugs to get out of the way before we get into all the fun. So we are part of the Geek Ultimate Alliance network with 8 shows. We've got on Mondays, World's Finest True Believers, my show, alternating bi-weekly with Ranger Alliance. The Ranger Alliance was this week. Next week, I've got World's Finest coming back with a very appropriate with Halloween coming basically that week. At that point, I've got a very timely story for the listeners with a returning guest. So look for that preview tweet coming out at noon on Friday. Then we've got Tuesdays, DC Alliance. We've got on Wednesdays, superhero discussions. On Thursdays, we've got Star Wars Alliance. Fridays, we got this show, Marvel Alliance. Saturdays, bi-weekly, a walk through the multiverse. And then on Sundays, bi-weekly, slice of film. DC Alliance goes live on this Geekverse YouTube feed on Monday nights. Star Wars Alliance, and that's at 9 o'clock. Star Wars Alliance goes live on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. And this show goes live at 9:10 p.m. So check out those shows live. And we do have a Patreon. So if you want to throw a couple of shekels our way, we've got 2 tiers. We got a $1 tier as our tip jar to say, hey, we're doing a good job. And then we've got our $5 tier that gives you ad-free episodes, early access episodes, and Patreon exclusive shows. So we want to thank our patrons for that. We can't do this without your support. If you can't join us on Patreon, we totally understand. You can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, whichever podcatcher choice may be. We have our solo feeds, Marvel Alliance. All you got to do is search for that. And other solo feeds are DC Alliance and Star Wars Alliance have their own solo feeds. But you can find all 8 shows on the GUA network feed. And as always, I would be remiss not to plug our official sponsor for the show, organicpricebooks.com, for all your omnibus hardcover collected edition needs. So we got some Marvel books, so check these out. We got Wolverine Omnibus coming back into stock. We've got some more X-Men, some Darth Vader, Ultimate Spider-Man. That is coming back into print this year for the first time in over a decade. Marvel's putting it back into print. So again, for us collectors, if we want this to do well, we will need to sell that. But here's some other things. Next year, I think sales of Ultimate Spider-Man have done very well, because next year, for the very first time, Ultimate X-Men will be coming into omnibus format next year for the very first time. So keep those sales going. And as you know, if you are want to show a little bit of love, stay support, use that code MarvelGUA at checkout for $2 off every single order. Use it all the time. Use it multiple times. We want to thank Organic Price Books for being an official sponsor of Marvel Alliance. And last but not least, we have for this month, we have a new sponsor for the GUA. We have Manscaped. Yes, get 20% off all your orders at Manscaped with free shipping using the code GUAPOD at manscaped.com for all your manscaping needs. Right, Brent?
Yeah, I can't take this seriously. Yeah, it is for basically for all your grooming needs. They're good.
Yes.
They're good products. They're high quality. So definitely check them out, please.
Check them out. So, all right. So we've got all the plugs, everything out of the way. Let us talk to the man of the hour, Sean O'Connell. As I said, you are in the middle. You said how close you are to wrapping up the book.
I have 4 chapters left, and I started one of them this evening. And found my way into the intro of how I kind of wanted to get going, which is the hardest part about each of the chapters, is kind of figuring out how to get into them. And especially if I write them out of order, which was the case for some of them, I kind of wanted to know where the chapter before it was going to end to see if I could naturally transition, and that got harder. So as more of the chapters get written, I'm trying to weave it into one coherent thingamabob.
And this is your second book, so I mean, you've learned a lot from the first one at that point. So, and going from a DC property to a Marvel property, it's got to be kind of, interesting changes.
It is, but the thing about the Spider-Man book or the Spider-Man story is that there's just so much more, and I now kind of realized, like, one of the critiques I got when I was pitching the Snyder Cut book around to publishers, I would hear this often, is that that sounds like a great magazine cover. Like that could be a really long feature, but I'm not quite sure that there's a book there. And I thought they were wrong, and there was enough to that story, I thought. But now that I'm sitting down to understand, when people pitch a book idea, like, it should have as much meat as this Spider-Man one does. And the thing about the Snyder Cut book is that as that process went on, especially because the movie got announced, it became like a breaking news story that you're putting together into book format, because there were so many things happening during the writing process that were changing the direction of it. With Spider-Man, all of this stuff is here, right? It's a legacy, and it's a lore. Even just focusing it to his Hollywood years, it gives you a window to stay within. But there are so many stories inside of it that you really feel like you want to do them justice and spend enough time digging through them and finding out what's interesting about them.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, it's interesting. So kind of our first question we'll start off with is, what led you to writing your next book to be focused on Spider-Man's history in Hollywood?
Well, he's my all-time favorite character. And so if I'm going to, this is something else I learned writing a book, you have to love the subject matter, because you're going to live in it for a very long period of time. So if it's not something that can hold your interest, don't attempt it. And so I live and breathe Spider-Man. Like, I adore, those are the films that when I'm sitting down on a couch, no matter what is on, I'm gonna like scan to see if one of those are playing. And it's any of them. It's the Raimi ones, it's the Webb ones, it's the MCU ones. I just adore that character. And I've been lucky enough over the course of this entertainment journalism career that I was reviewing films back when Raimi started, and so I feel like I've been covering his films all the way through. And when we got to the Webb ones, I had made it far enough up the chain of command at different entertainment journalist places where I was able to get really good access to Mark Webb and Andrew Garfield and that whole team. And then transitioning over into the Tom Holland stuff, by then I'd become really close with a lot of the Marvel folk and got to visit the Homecoming set and the Far From Home set. So I had this wealth of knowledge, that I could then sort of comb through and realize that, like, oh, there is a lot of stuff here for a book, and I already have it, kind of thing. Now I just need to organize it into something coherent.
Well, obviously, even with that history, you still would have researched a ton and researched a lot. I'm curious, like, did you have any preconceived notions or any like thoughts and opinions that you thought about the Spider-Man movies prior to your research that changed as a result of facts or stories or anecdotes that you found afterwards?
Yeah, absolutely. I forgot that there was ever a time period when Marvel movies were not, sought after, that you had to convince a studio to take a chance on a Marvel character. And so I write pretty early on. I try to give the history of Marvel coming out to Hollywood, essentially. And this is even going back to Stan Lee in the 80s. And when he shopped scripts around to Canon, and Canon having the rights to the films. This is before any of the studios gave it a shot. So putting all of that together and trying to just decipher the amount of trouble that they had with the rights of who owned what. And there was one point where like one studio owned his theatrical rights, one studio owned his home video rights, and one video owned his merchandising rights. And they all like clung to them, thinking that was their foot in the door. But nobody really knew at the time how to make a good superhero movie. There was no template for anybody to follow. And instead you had projects that had tried and failed miserably and almost scared studio executives off. So one of the fun things I had about a preconceived notion about how this is done is how much work the behind the scenes people on, especially the Raimi films, had to dedicate to making something that works on the comic book page credible in real life. And even just I got a chance to interview John Dykstra, the legendary John Dykstra, who, worked on A New Hope, basically. And the jump in visual effects craft from Spider-Man to Spider-Man 2 was so significant, because each time that they did a movie, they learned and taught themselves so that the next one would be better and the next one would be better. And then you just saw the evolution continue, they each were sort of building block. And I never really stopped to think about the amount of work that had to go in initially to get those projects off the ground.
So, you got probably a ton of different people you're talking to build this and, just some of the people that, you dream about, you want to be a part of the book. Like which interview, if you can even say the interview person at that point, gave you some of the most interesting information for the book?
Right now, and I still have a couple interviews to go, it's Avi. I got a chance to sit down with Avi Arad for several hours. And wow. He was just, you forget how much he was at ground zero, he was the one
built it.
Yes. We wouldn't have Marvel Studios without him.
He was Feige before Feige,
I mean, to hear him, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it, to hear him telling stories about, that kid who got me coffee, on the Raimi sets, and to hear him, bring Feige along kind of thing. Yes, you're exactly right, Brent. He was Feige before Feige. And that's a bit of the thing that I kind of write about in one of the chapters. And I find that is going to be, I think, controversial because Kevin's so beloved, and rightfully so. Like the things he's accomplished is ridiculous. And Avi, because of decisions he's made later, carries a little bit of baggage with the fans. But you can't ignore his contributions to everything that happened early on. And so to hear, like sitting back and listening to him tell stories about all the different meetings that he took in the early days about, getting X-Men set up at Fox and getting Blade set up at New Line and bringing David Goyer in because Goyer had a pitch for Blade and how they were going to get it going, and the obstacles they ran into with having an African-American lead who they couldn't sell overseas, back at the time. Like Wesley Snipes wouldn't be a draw in international markets. And it's things like that you don't even think of. He started telling me about when we branched away from the Spider-Man stuff briefly, and he talked about the challenges of getting Downey approved. One of the things that he told me, which you never even stopped to think about, was like the studio at the time when they launched Iron Man, they didn't want to insure Downey. Like every actor who sort of comes in has to they come with like a built-in insurance where you're backing up their salary and you're backing up the amount of money that gets put into this. And they were hesitant to roll the dice on Downey. So there are a ton of great stories like that behind the scenes. And Avi was there for all of them, for every step of the way. And it's continued through the Venom verse or the Sony Spider-Man films that he's doing. Believe him or not, he and Phil Lord and Chris Miller tell their different sides of the story, but he says he's the one who pushed Amy Pascal to branch into animation, which I don't doubt because he has a great history with the X-Men animated series that he was pushing. And then, of course, Chris and I were having this conversation before the show started. Avi's whole mind is just for toys. Like he wants to drive everything towards toys. One of my favorite stories is when Into the Spider-Verse, God, I'm sorry if I'm talking so.
Go.
One of the greatest stories is when Into the Spider-Verse won animated feature at the Oscars, and the whole team went up on stage. Avi was up there with a stocking cap with the Spider-Man emblem on it, which I just found hysterical, because like that's what he decided to wear at the Academy Awards. And Phil Lord and Chris Miller were saying to me, like, have you ever been to his house? And I was like, no, I've never been to Avi's house. They said isn't a single inch of that house that's not covered with merchandise for Spider-Man, Venom. So like he just lives and breathes this stuff. And I think his passion really does come through, in the projects. He pushes for the right things. Does he always get the thing right? Not always, but I think his heart is coming from the right direction.
Well, that's what you kind of like hearing, the person that you see, you kind of, when you hear him speak and go on interviews and reflecting on it. I mean, he praises Kevin a lot, but and Kevin learned so much from him to become who he is today.
Sure.
And you kind of, the whole story about, the pushing for Downey at that point as well. I mean, if people know anything about Robert Downey Jr.'s background, he's the perfect Tony Stark.
Yeah.
Just his background alone brings that kind of, so I can't, see, I mean, we could always fan cast who else could be it, but for the time, it's just like, oh, his life is emulating Tony Stark outside of being a genius billionaire at that point.
Right. Yeah. Now, and that's what he is now.
Yeah, exactly. On the flip side of that, like, who was the most difficult person to secure as of right now?
Well, two. I'll give you two.
Okay.
Feige's hard. I've gotten Feige several times over the years on sets for different things, at junkets for different things. He and I did a one-on-one. Amy at Pascal and Feige did a 2-on-1 with me for the Spider-Man Homecoming junket. At the Spider-Man Far From Home junket, he did a 1-on-1 with me. So I have old interviews with Feige. I got him most recently for Shang-Chi, and every time we'd sit down, I'd ask him a couple of Spider-Man questions, obviously. But, getting a chance to sit down with Kevin for the book specifically is like trying to see the wizard behind the curtain. It's really difficult. And then when you turn around and find out that they're going to release this other MCU, making of book, it's coming out in October, this extensive guide that they're putting out themselves, then you understand, oh, okay, well, he's probably saving his best stuff for that. Kevin's been hard to get, but I've been getting him at different points here and there. The other one is Mark Webb. Mark Webb won't talk about Spider-Man. He has no interest in talking about.
Can't imagine why.
That I tried to make to his people, and Mark and I had a really good relationship. I interviewed him a number of different times over the course of the Amazing Spider-Man films. I'm a fan of those films, and he and I talked at length about the big picture universe that I know that he was trying to build, and I totally understand that it was getting foisted on him. In a very rapid fashion by decisions being made behind by the chain of command. But I kind of wanted to make this point known to Mark, like the story is going to get told regardless, like, so why don't you put your spin on it, and I kept saying to him, because this really is the point of the book, and this is a good point to make here. It's very much a celebration of everything that people have accomplished with Spider-Man over the years. It's not in any way trying to be a let's tear down, anything that was accomplished. Even when I write extensively about the Amazing Spider-Man franchise, it is about some of the cooler stories that came out of that. I have a whole chapter that kicks off with Andrew Garfield's, to me, life-changing speech at Comic-Con. I talked to Matt Tolmack, I talked to Avi, I talked to Andrew, just about the decisions to do that stunt and how terrified they were, because to them, there were so many ways that could have gone wrong and only one or two ways that it could have gone right. And to their credit, it went as right as it could possibly go. It was a great first step for him. So, I always wanted to sort of explore the things that worked in the Amazing Spider-Man franchise while also putting it in a context that says, okay, we all kind of understand, in hindsight, why these films probably didn't work as well as Sony wanted them to, as the people who were involved with them wanted them to. And so Mark, to this point, and I'll still try to get him until the very last minute, but so far to date, he has not wanted to participate.
And again, it one can understand it's a sore spot for him because how devoted he was to it, and like you said, the people behind even him not letting him do as much as he wanted or how he wanted to put it out. So I mean, one could get it, but hopefully, like you said, I mean, the book is about a celebration and giving a chance to him, but hopefully you'll get him.
It's fascinating to go back and watch Amazing and then Amazing 2 and realize how much that first one truly was the guy who did 500 Days of Summer trying to apply those sensibilities to a superhero movie, right? It's still very character driven. It's grounded in Emma and Andrew, and it has its superhero elements, but you could tell that's the Mark Webb movie, that they hired him to deliver. And then 2 is just the machine, of we're going to build a cinematic universe on the back of this movie, whether you like it or not. And I feel like he just got put through the meat grinder.
Yeah, I recently rewatched both of those movies and the Maguire ones. For some reason I had this feeling like I wanted to revisit all those before next couple months. Can't imagine why. Yeah. And I really enjoyed them. And to this day, like Amazing 1, I really, really like. I mean, there's stuff in Amazing 2, and I know its reputation, but I think I like it more than most people. Of course, it's Spider-Man, so I'm going to like it. But it is there was a lot of good ideas there, and you can really tell where it's like the same people who made the second one aren't necessarily the same who made the first one. Like there was a lot more hands in the cookie jar, if you will, or cooks in the kitchen, I guess. It is kind of, it almost sad with some of the stuff to like look at it. And I love that Spider-Man's in the MCU now, but like it's just seeing like how good it could have been. And I get it. Sony wanted they wanted the MCU. They wanted their version of it, their take on it. And it's debatable of how much room they have for that, but it is kind of, it is sad for Mark Webb, and I'm going to root for you because I'm sure he's got some stories. So I really hope that you can convince him to give you at least a little bit of time on it.
The stuff that works in 2 works extremely well,
yeah,
and then the stuff that doesn't really doesn't. And to me, it's the parents. It's the whole subplot with the parents being spies, and
yes,
yeah, and then that deleted scene. Even though it's a touching scene, the deleted scene, it's
right.
It just doesn't.
It's really well acted, but I'm glad it was cut. I'm glad it was cut.
But that movie gives us a live action version of the Death of Gwen Stacy, and I will never.
It does.
Yes.
But I mean, that's tremendous. It's tremendous. It's done so well that I can't fault that movie.
Absolutely. So sticking with the Sony movies, but jumping forward a little bit, I want to ask, are you going to touch on the Sony, whatever they're calling it now, the Sony Spider-Man universe, I think is their current name, Venom, Morbius, the rumored Craven movie?
You don't miss the acronym, the SPUMP?
I mean, it's just hard to keep up with. Sony Universe Marvel characters and then Sony Pictures Universe of Marvel characters. They shouldn't never call themselves SPUMC. You shouldn't have PU in your acronym.
Yeah, that's what we kind of focused on this show until they changed the name. It's like PU, that's the operative word. We don't say that name.
So to answer your question, yes, the book is going to dive into it gets into Spider-Verse, and it dives. I got interviews with Phil Lord and Chris Miller, which was a great conversation. I got Rodney Rothman, one of the co-directors of it, just to talk a bit about putting that together and getting their run. And then of course I have a whole section dedicated to Venom. And one of the beautiful things was being able to see Let There Be Carnage and see the ramifications, of that and have it play out. Because, one of the big theories I have is that by lending Spider-Man over to the MCU for X amount of years, it allowed Sony in their own weird way to pause, and take a breath and start to put together a universe, which will never not be strange to build the Spider-Man universe without Spider-Man. But when you factor in the 2 Venom films, which have introduced such characters as, Craven, potentially Toxin, you have Ravencroft as a location. And then you're getting into Morbius, which we haven't had a chance to see yet, and then a Craven movie. And if No Way Home brings back a number of the existing villains, that when No Way Home finishes, we may end up at a point where Sony has a universe that is suddenly populated with a ton of really interesting Spider-Man villains. and all they need is a Spider-Man left, and the theories have run rampant from that point. So it's like, oh my God, wait a second, we just quietly turned around, and Sony, who we kind of poked fun at, for all the ideas they were throwing at the wall, hey, we're gonna do Silver and Black. We're gonna do Madam Web. Like
Secret Agent
Jackpot.
Secret Agent May. Yeah, Jackpot.
There's gonna be a Jackpot movie.
Yeah,
Come on.
Spike Lee is gonna direct. Night Watch.
Those Aunt May rumors coming out after Amazing 2. I'm like, I don't know how much credibility there was, but I was like, well, I guess maybe you're gonna talk about it, guys. I'm sure somewhere it's on a dartboard in an office somewhere.
But what scene was so intriguing to me was Michael Keaton showing up at the very end of the Morbius trailer.
Oh my gosh, I have so many questions about that after the Venom, credit scene, and we can speak openly about it. Don't worry about that. But the timeline, where are they putting that? Is that going to be a credit scene? Is that going to be like, part of me is like, are they going to cut that entirely because of things that have changed? I'm like, I have so many questions.
So Michael Keaton was doing a movie this past year called The Protege, I want to say it's called. Yes. It's a Netflix film. And we got him for a junket. And I didn't do the interview, but I gave a question to my guy who did it over at Cinema Blend. And I said, just ask him if that is the Adrian Toomes from Homecoming or like a multiverse Adrian Toomes. And when he asked him that, Keaton like shook his head, and then he was like, I can't answer that at all. Like, oh, good. I'm glad we knocked you off your block, because that day he was getting a ton of Batman Back in the Flash questions.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think he was ready for an Adrian Toomes reference. But that's another villain who, even if you just factor in some of the people who've been introduced through the MCU movies, which, reminder, are Sony movies, that brings in Shocker, Tinkerer, Vulture, Mysterio, Scorpion is potentially there in prison.
Matt Gargan. Yep.
There's the potential for all of these villains to be here, if Sony can gradually move forward with all of this. So we shall see.
One of our frequent journalists and chat listeners, S Bub, said basically Sony's playing 5D Sony chess.
Okay, now that's giving them way too much credit. I think they have backed into this, but they haven't flubbed it yet. Let's say that.
Yeah, that's true. The amount of statements they kind of, I can only imagine when Kevin hears some of the statements sometimes some of the executives say, is like, oh my gosh, what is Kevin think?
I love when he and Amy do press together, because Amy will say something of like, oh yeah, we're totally connected to this.
Yes,
and Feige's looking at like,
excuse me?
I don't think you are.
Chris, I'm going to go off book for a second here.
Yeah, go for it.
I got to ask about this. Around I'm already forgetting what the movie was, but the Sony hack scandal. The Sony hack scandal, that is often attributed towards being one of the dominoes that fell that gave us Tom Holland and the MCU Spider-Man.
Sure.
I got to ask, are you going into that at all? Does that come up in the book?
It comes up a little bit. I don't dig too deeply into the hack, but I do capture the fact that these conversations between Sony and Disney were happening way before that, because the way that Amy describes it, I got time with Amy Pascal also, which was terrific and really eye-opening from an executive standpoint, because she candidly admits, like, we had simply run out of ways to tell a refreshing Spider-Man story, and she says it was time to turn it over to Marvel. There's so much that you can't ignore. And this came into play with the Justice League book too, and how much Warner Brothers was trying to chase what Marvel was doing. All of the decisions made on any superhero movie has to be held in contrast to what Marvel was doing at the same time. All of these studios were looking at Marvel and saying, why can't we put together what they're putting together? How come it works for them and it doesn't work for us? And it's just that Kevin had such a great relationship with Amy and with Avi and Matt Tolmach, through the years coming up on all of these movies, that he was able to, anytime that they had time together, just say, hey, why don't you let us tell a Spider-Man story? Come on, let's, you guys can keep the rights, keep the rights, keep distribution. Just let us creatively put our thumbprint on it, because as you can see, we know what we're doing. the hack, what I think, made it clear to the fandom that these conversations were happening. And the minute that genie is out of the bottle, you just can't put it back. So, but I think it would have happened. I think the deal would have happened regardless. I don't think the hack was the full reason. It might have just sped it up a little bit.
Sure. And I remember that there were like Feige was still giving them notes and stuff, like professional courtesy on the movies, because one of the outcomes of the hack was a bunch of notes on Amazing 2. And if you go through, I don't know if you've ever read them. I did. And it's like he just like nails like these things are good, these things are bad. And then you watch the movie and you're like, this is why he is who he is, because he's so dead on, just so accurate with it. Yep. Just the way he knows what people want with the Spider-Man movie is just incredible.
And some people like look at him being in the editing bay with all the directors at that point, saying, "Oh, he's not giving him freedom." It's like he's also helping them understand what the audience kind of wants at that point, and make sure that there is a balance between what director's freedom and then also we've never heard one director say he's overbearing.
No, and in a way, like it's such a unique situation because. It is because he's so good at what he does, that I think if anyone else tried to be the steward, over a larger cinematic universe, it's really, really hard, to make all those decisions. I even think that there are a lot of decisions that were made over the course of the MCU and especially the Infinity Saga, where they just got lucky. Like there's a couple of things that probably should have broke against them. And it might have not derailed the entire thing, but it wouldn't have been as seamless as it was. And maybe Kevin has the foresight to predict a lot of the different things that's coming. But if so, he's pretty remarkable, because I don't care how big that board is on the wall that he's looking at. Like these things just don't fall into place. And even just to use the pandemic as an example, imagine if the pandemic, which delayed everything for 18 months roughly, had occurred towards the end of the Infinity Saga. And if release dates had to move around and shift, and what that would have destroyed to the continuity.
Yeah, I have, thank my lucky stars so many times that we got through Far From Home before this all happened. Like,
could you imagine?
Goodness. Yeah. Oh my God, I'd have been a crush. And as I always want to say, not to downplay the very real issues of the pandemic, but for this part of my life, would have just been soul crushing. And
of course.
Oh yeah, I have thought that so many times. It's like if we had to have a 563-day break, thank goodness it happened when it did.
And it happened right at a time when they were launching a phase, if we're calling it phase 4, that wasn't contingent on all of the projects having to interlock. So you could move the Disney Plus shows forward and it wasn't affecting the larger continuity. You could kick off with a Black Widow movie that's a prequel. All of these things are fascinating. And I think Feige is not as lucky as he's smart, but luck has a big part of it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, of course, they've been very fortunate. And I mean, even stuff like Robert Downey Jr. in Civil War, like something he had to fight for. And because he didn't have the autonomy at that point to make that decision and make those budget calls, and being able to, he was lucky in the sense that he was able to get that pushed through, because obviously that dramatically changes it. The Spider-Man issue in Civil War, that obviously changed everything going forward. Absolutely. You cannot deny that he has had, and that they have, his whole parliament have had great fortune with what they're doing.
Yeah, before we head to our first ad break at that point, I like what S-Bub says. The pandemic also affected this quote-unquote Marvel fatigue that many were wary of or concerned about at that point, even though,
we will never know. We will never know if it's going to be there.
All right, listeners, we're going to take our first ad break. So as you know, these ads help keep the lights on the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network. We don't get to choose what ads come on, and they can be a bit loud. So I'm going to give you that 3 count to turn that volume down before they come on. 3, 2, 1. We'll be right back. All right. So you've given us some kind of good tidbits at that point. If you had to pick, and if you can even say, one interview right now that gave you the most interesting information at that point, who, when we read this book, should kind of pay to, when we read it at that point, who do you think's going to be the surprise for us in the sense of the information they give?
I'm going to say, let me think. There's 2. The first one is Jim Atchison, who is a Academy Award winning costume designer who worked on the 3 Raimi films. And the stories that he told me about designing the look of Spider-Man gets so deep into so many of the conversations that were happening at that time of how to translate these characters from the page to the screen properly. And if you remember, right around that same time of the first Raimi one, they cloaked all the X-Men in black leather, you know,
Yep.
and a
'Cause
lot of these,
no one likes comic accurate costumes.
a lot of these characters were not, they're not practical. There's no practical way to bring them to life on screen. And so many of the stories that he walks me all the way through Raimi's 1, 2, and 3. He takes me deep behind the scenes of the hatred of the black suit and everything that came with Venom. He walks me through all of the stuff that they had sketched out for Raimi's 4th. And just the stories that he tells about heading to Vegas to study with Cirque du Soleil to figure out how to put harnesses on bodies that could still be cloaked under skin tight outfits. And that beautiful web pattern, that's so significant to the Raimi costume, of those having to be glued on pieces, legitimately glued on pieces. And to have 20 costumes available at any given point because of the stunt doubles that had to be in them, and how they all had to be shaped to fit the body sizes of the different stunt performers. And they had to also kind of look like Toby. And one of the things that he told me too, which was the most fascinating, these elements that I never stopped to think about too much, is that Spider-Man is one of the first heroes that they put on camera where his face is completely covered. So it's not how do you act in that, but it's how do you do a 10 to 12 hour day with an actor who, whose face you can't see. So you don't know if they are struggling underneath there. You don't know. Like now you see sometimes these behind the scenes shots of like they can take the eye sockets out and they can put straws down for the actors, but they didn't know any of this stuff back in the day. Like all of this was trial and error. And on the first Spider-Man, the costume department was on Santa Monica Boulevard next to an adult video store. Because the Sony wouldn't even give them enough budget to have a space on the lot because nobody knew. No one knew. Like the original Spider-Man costume is designed in a warehouse that's right next door to a porn shop on Santa Monica Boulevard.
I did not know that.
And so,
heard it here first.
Atchison has stories like that just blow my mind.
I will never not think of that now when I watch that movie.
Thank you. And the other one is there's a guy whose name I'm blanking on right now. I have to go through my notes to get it. It was a great interview. Do you know the sketches that are online of the Vulture and Spider-Man from Spider-Man 4?
Yes.
All that concept art. I had a long conversation with that guy about working for Raimi and about how much Sam mapped out of that movie. And some of he walks me through a lot of the big action set pieces that were mapped out for that movie. He walks me through what the opening sequence of that movie was supposed to be. He talks at length about Bruce Campbell coming down to the set and his relationship with Sam and how much they pulled into all of that. And then the heartbreak of Sam realizing, that he wasn't going to do it, that he was going to walk away. And I think some of those stories that he told me, not just about the details about the script, but really what the mood was behind the scenes of that franchise as Sam was trying really hard to not let 3 be his final one, but to also realize that they had hit a point where the franchise had run its course, and there were a lot of other factors that were pushing them towards changing things up.
So, you said you're a lifelong Marvel fan. Spider-Man's your favorite. One of the questions we were curious about. There's hundreds of incarnations of Spider-Man. Who do you put at the top? What's your favorite? Is it a comic book run? Is it one of the animated series? Is it one of the movies? Is there that one version of Spider-Man that is like your definitive Spider-Man, your take on the character?
Wow, that's a fascinating question. That's a great one. My favorite on-screen one, the closest I think they've ever gotten to me seeing the Spider-Man that lives in my brain is Chris Pine's version from Into the Spider-Verse.
Okay.
I think that his humor, the way that he delivers his humor in the very short scenes that he has, just feels and sounds like Peter Parker to me. The action, in those early sequences are so fantastic. The way that he layers in the jokes about the villains that he's fighting are so great. Outside of that, there was that run from like in the Amazing Spider-Man in the comics from like issue probably like 220, 225, somewhere around there until the black costume. And I love Secret Wars, and I think that, the black costume was great. But in that run, Hobgoblin became a really great villain. And I want to say that it was John Romita who was drawing those issues. There might have been a different artist who was in there drawing those. I loved that run. There was a lot of Kingpin stuff. The Rose became a villain during that. I loved that Hobgoblin run, like when they were debating who was going to be.
Yeah, Uncle Raj and Roger Stern.
Oh, is that who it was? Is that who was drawing him?
The writer at that point was Roger Stern.
Okay, gotcha. I loved all that. I think in that run too, wasn't that the Spider-Man Wolverine standalone story when they were in Germany? That was like a standalone book. And it was all during that time.
Came a little later, but that's a really good book too.
Terrific story. So that run, I think that run really captures the highlight of where he was at that stage.
Adding on to that, what's your favorite Spider-Man movie?
It has to be, well, it's Into the Spider-Verse. I think Into the Spider-Verse is a flawless Spider-Man movie. And I say that even though I'm not a Miles guy, because Miles came up at a time when I had kind of stopped reading comics for a long time. And then I had to get back into them. I ended up getting Marvel Unlimited, which is the greatest thing.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yes. Big fans.
I got it 3 years ago. And I mean, it's just comic collecting is a very, very expensive habit. So to hold a tablet and have access to this, extensive library is such a gift. So I slept on that entire thing, but then I dove into the Bendis, Ultimate Universe, and it took me through, and oh my God, Bagley is one of the most incredible Spider-Man artists.
He is my favorite.
Of all time.
I have a piece here that you really can't see on camera, but it is signed by him from a couple years ago. I was thankful to get to meet him.
I'm getting goosebumps thinking about his art. Like his art is incredible.
He drew a spider on my daughter's hand, but my wife wouldn't let me get it tattooed.
That's great. But Spider-Verse to me really did an amazing job of retelling the bones of a Spider-Man origin story, right down to his uncle getting killed and him feeling responsible for it. And it taps into the emotions of that. I love the sort of, alternate Spider-Man. Like we have a movie where Spider-Ham is in it. Like that's unbelievable.
Yes, we do.
It's ridiculous to me. But live action, I have to go with 2. I mean, I have to go with 2. Like Molina is just, he's a perfect Doc Ock.
Yeah, that's the poster behind me. So
yeah, it's great. I don't love, and I get roasted by fans for saying this. I don't love how they explained why he loses his powers. To me, it comes across a little bit as just like he got sad. And his powers in a way.
Yeah.
And there is David Koepp, who I also got a chance to interview for this book, had a screenplay that was supposed to be Spider-Man 2. And it was called The Amazing Spider-Man. And it was one of the ones that he pitched over to Raimi, and Raimi ended up not using it, going in a different direction. I think he used the Michael Chabon primarily. But in that one, there's a great explanation as to why Spider-Man would have lost his powers. And it had something to do with Kurt Connors explaining to him that the spiders they were experimenting on and the radiation that they were giving to them led to something that essentially deteriorated their powers. And they figured out a way to boost them back up with protein. And so like Spider-Man chugs a ton of milk and then like jumps back into the third act battle. So he loses his powers and he goes to Kurt Connors, and Kurt Connors is like, well, yeah, that would make sense because the spiders we worked on had this, and this. And Peter's like, oh God, that's what's happening to me. And I was like, you should have kept that.
That's different. A little bit of a that's got a got milk ad written all over.
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
Drink your milk, kids. You too can be Spider-Man.
Instead, it's pizza time. You got pizza.
It is pizza time. Very, very nice. Yeah, that's interesting. And you're not wrong about the sadness. We certainly aren't going to roast you for it.
Yeah, no. Looking at expectations and kind of getting it a No Way Home at that point, and theories that are all over the place, including Maguire, Garfield returning. Your personal opinion, what all these different theories and rumors, what do you personally think is true and what's not? And I know you've put it out there, and we'll put it in our show notes as well, subscribing to your newsletter, that your book will and is being, you've delayed it until No Way Home so that you can talk about it at that point. Right now, being a fan, being who you are at that point, which one of these theories are you hoping for? Which one do you think are kind of like pie in the sky, not going to happen?
I will go on record as saying that I'm fairly certain that Toby and Andrew are going to show up. The only thing that prevents me from doing it or going full throttle with it is that Andrew he's so adamant about it, right? And in a way, like, I understand that you could play the, hey, I'm not in it, and because you're trying to protect spoilers. But it's the way that he's overselling, of just like, I swear to you, I am not in this. So that when it comes back around, and I understand that when he shows up in it, fans are going to totally forget. They're going to be like, it's not a big deal. But I think he's playing that wrong. I just think he's playing it wrong. I think he's pushing it too hard, with these stories. Like, if you watch him, if he's acting, then it's a little over the top. Here's the thing. I'm torn with this because I don't think Tom has had a chance to just get a Spider-Man movie. Like, his films so far have been paired with Iron Man, paired with Nick Fury, but it wasn't Nick Fury kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And Mysterio, the twist of, but who going into Far From Home thought Mysterio was a good guy kind of thing.
I tell you, I heard gasp.
Yeah.
I heard gasp.
Yeah,
really? But these are the general audience people.
Yep.
They're not the people who saw, because there'd never been Mysterio really in any kind of media outside the books before.
Sure.
And so they just didn't know. If they didn't watch that amazing 90s animated show, they didn't know who Mysterio was. I mean, obviously we knew who he was the second. Oh, he's obviously the bad guy. But no, I did hear it. The general audience was fooled by that.
That's pretty funny. So I'm torn in that. Do I think it'd be incredibly cool to see, the 3 Spider-Men teaming up against, different versions of the villains that come up? Of course I do. Like, of course, that's going to be incredible. Do I also think it's a lot, to pack into a movie if all of this stuff is to come to fruition? Yeah, I do. I'm a little worried. Like, people complain that Raimi's third Spider-Man had too many villains because it had 3, and now it's like, here's all of them from the multiverse. But part of me wonders how much of it is, it's been fascinating to watch the Marvel Disney Plus shows and the speculation that has overwhelmed them of what fans think they're going to see. And then when they don't get it, it's the show's fault. But the show is never supposed to be that, Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mephisto. Exactly. So I don't know what No Way Home is supposed to be. And kind of in a way, Sony has painted themselves a little bit into a corner because it would be very easy for them to release a plot summary, or a poster and just quell the speculation a little bit. But they don't. The longer that they sit on it, the more the speculation can run rampant. So I hope, here's my ultimate hope. I hope that this is primarily a Tom movie. And I hope that the Andrew and Toby involvement, if indeed it does happen, is more limited to the very end, or even something that's setting up a Sinister Six movie that can be its own thing. Because right now there's a lot of stuff happening in this movie. Peter's got to deal with his identity. We got to get through the Doctor Strange, spell and things going wrong. You hear other speculations about where the villains could even come from. Like, how much time are we going to have to put all this stuff together? So I'm excited, but I'm also cautious. I'm wary about, can they pull it off?
Yeah, and I think that's fair. My thought whenever I hear someone say it just feels like too much in this one movie is, sure, you could compare it to Spider-Man 3, but you could also think about Avengers Endgame, right?
Yeah.
It's like how much stuff was in there, and
True.
This is going to fall somewhere between those extremes. They have a little bit of the shortcut of they can drive people to watch Spider-Man 2 for who Alfred Molina was, drive the younger kids out there who didn't grow up on those movies the way we did. Or they can remind you, oh, you've seen those. I'm convinced some of those movies are going to hit Disney Plus sometime in the next month and a half. Because they do have that deal where they get the back catalog. November 12th would be a great day to announce that kind of thing. But I do kind of feel like you're right. Like they are in this weird corner because it seems like I follow Apple as an Apple products a lot. And a lot of times if there's an event coming up and they're not going to do something that's rumored, there's a controlled leak that comes out and squashes it ahead of time. And I kind of feel like the closer we get, we're 57 days away, who's counting, the closer we get to this movie, and there's not something like that to squash the Toby and Andrew rumors.
Right.
If they're not in it, it's going to be real bad for them. Like people are going to be so, and the story they're telling with just Tom Holland's identity and Doctor, that's enough. That is enough. Don't get me wrong. I'm very excited to see all of them, but that is enough. But what do you make of the marketing for this movie? Because we've had one trailer and like one title card. And at this point, less than 2 months away, we don't even have a poster.
I don't get it.
We have lots of fan posters.
Movie theaters are using them. Movie theaters are using fan posters now because they don't have anything to market with locally.
And I don't get it. I think Marvel's in a weird spot right now because they had 2 movies that they really had to do audience education on, with Shang-Chi and the Eternals. So I think that they are using most of their bandwidth to push those, potentially knowing that, and Chris and I were saying this before the show started, like they don't have to show anything. They could literally put up a title card that's like December 17th, we'll see you there. And all
we joked with our network saying you're never getting a trailer. You're just going to go to the theater and just see the movie. Yeah. They don't need to.
They don't need to. And in fact, whatever this second trailer is, yes, I'll watch it, but I don't want to see anything that's in it.
Yep.
Because we're X amount of days from it. So I'll hate watch it.
And you'll cover it.
And I'll cover it, and I will not want to see any of that because we made it this far. There's certain properties that you can do that with. This is one of the rare movies where you can just say, it's the third Spider-Man movie. We'll see you guys there. So I don't need a poster. And the poster's going to suck anyway. The Sony Spider-Man posters are not great. They leave a lot to be desired. I hope it's cool. But I don't know. We'll see. I think the whole marketing campaign has been totally bizarre.
I would pay a lot of money to talk with like the head of the marketing when this movie comes out. Be like, as much as I would love to, meet other people like say Kevin Feige, but be like, who's in charge of the marketing? Because I've got questions and I just don't. There is a story there, and I would love to hear it.
There's a weird dichotomy in that it's a Sony movie. But Sony still very much is being told what to do by Marvel.
Right.
And that's why my big takeaway from No Way Home, whether this is going to happen or not, is that by the end of this movie, Tom Holland is going to be freed, quote unquote, from the MCU. And I think he's going to move over to the Spider-Man movies.
I have said that many times. I don't necessarily think it'll be permanent. I think he'll show back up in the MCU in the future, but I feel like we have at least 2 or 3 appearances of Tom Holland as part of the Marvel Cinematic Multiverse, as I've been calling it, but outside of the MCU.
Yes, because the Venom scene solidified it for me. The of Sony saying, "Oh, we're going to bring Tom Holland over into our universe," and they have a couple of movies to play with, because also Marvel has gotten themselves to a point where they're always going to need Spider-Man. Like, it's always going to be fun to have him. But if you look ahead to the next 3 years of Marvel, they have some really exciting things coming. They haven't even touched on Fantastic Four or Mutants, and there's so many places that they could potentially go that maybe we really did have a good run. Maybe Kevin wasn't talking out of both sides of his mouth when he legitimately said, hey, if it ends now, I had a chance to make 2 fun Spider-Man movies, and I never thought I'd get a chance to make any of them, and so that was great. But when they renegotiated in 2019, they renegotiated for 1 more movie, and then Spider-Man can cameo in an upcoming Marvel movie to be announced later. And so once they signed that deal, I think the powers that be said, and this is probably why we didn't hear what the story is. And normally there was no set visit for No Way Home. For Homecoming and Far From Home, we were able to go to the sets. They walked us through the entire movies. Here's, save for 1 or 2 spoilers. This is everything that's going to happen. They did not do that for No Way Home. And I think it's because Feige and Amy Pascal realized this is our last shot. We're going to do 1 more big Marvel movie. We're going to blow it all out with all these great villains, but they're also going to narratively push towards more villains that are set up for the Sony universe. And there you go. You got Tom Holland. Because Tom Holland, well, those most recent quotes that he gave was, if we're able to keep doing these, you're going to be able to keep doing them.
Yeah. The end of the Homecoming trilogy.
They're going to be something different, he said. It'll be different in tone. It'll be different because it's going to be a Sony movie. It's going to be a full-on Sony movie without Marvel's help.
Brent, I really want you to ask that question you put on this show. I want to hear what Sean has to see, have his take on your theory.
My theory about the Spider-Man cameo?
No, the if he appears in the MC movie post No Way Home.
Oh, well, just in general, building off of the Tobey Maguire rumors and looking ahead at who is directing Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and that I think Spider-Man is going to. I think Tom Holland is. I'm with you. I think he's out of the MCU. Like the literal character is hopping universes, not unlike when Peter went to the Ultimate Universe in the comics for 5 issues. To me, that deal, and I went back and I looked, and it was just announced that it didn't say Tom Holland will appear in another movie. It just said Spider-Man will. Feige even said something like he's the character that can jump universes, across universes, something along those lines. I'd have to look up the exact quote.
Yep.
And there's this part of me that's like, is there any chance that Tobey Maguire is showing up and the Spider-Man cameo would actually be in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness? Nothing has come out of that set. Nothing's leaked. And this isn't one of those Mephisto times. Like, if it doesn't happen, fine. Right. But I'm like, they never said Tom Holland. So could it be? Could it be?
Listen, yes, it could be. It could actually be. And, just putting Sam Raimi at the head of that. Now, Raimi's a huge Doctor Strange fan. He's loved Doctor Strange from the jump. So I guess getting the opportunity, and he gave an interview somewhat recently where he talked about, like, I never thought I would do another one of these again. But then it was kind of the challenge of, well, actually, can I do another one of these? And if he's ever going to do it, it's going to step into Doctor Strange. It'd be tremendous just to see. Like, I think I'd be more excited to see Sam getting to direct Tobey, as Spider-Man than I am John Watts getting a chance to play with everyone else's toys. But, all due respect to John Watts, who I think is a very serviceable director. There's no nostalgia, to having him team up with Defoe and Molina in this upcoming movie. So that would be amazing if Tobey stayed around and showed up in Multiverse of Madness.
Kind of leading towards, we got a last few questions at this point, focusing on Spider-Man itself. Like, what do you think Spider-Man continues to resonate with the general audience, whether it be in comics, TV, or movies? Like, next to Batman, Superman, it's Spider-Man, the next character that what makes that such a endearing character in whatever medium people follow?
Yeah, the answer's always just his relatability. It's legitimately the fact that when you look up on screen, you could see either, there's a portion of you in that character, or at least somebody and I'll go to his Civil War scene and how beautifully written I think that bedroom scene is. With just stupid little lines of dialogue that should be throwaway things about, he dumpster dives for tech, and the way that Tony can see right through him, despite the fact that he thinks that he's this, like the way he shows him the YouTube videos and all this different stuff, like you weave those elements into Spider-Man because they are things that when we see them, we're like, oh yeah, I do that. Or someone else that I know does something like that. In Homecoming, these little character beats that they put into it, the way that Ned finds out, that Peter is Spider-Man is because he's coming over to build this Lego set, the Death Star Lego set.
Yeah.
Like, who can't relate to that?
Yeah.
Like, even just guy in the chair is really funny. Like these little elements where you look at it. One of my favorite scenes is obviously the car confrontation outside the Homecoming dance, which is like, that's why you hire Keaton for that movie, right? Like, so he can intimidate Tom Holland. But then when Tom Holland gets out and walks into the prom and they're playing, I think it's Space Age Love Song. It's such it's the perfect high school moment. Like, I feel like I'm in that dance. I feel like I've been to that dance. Like, all these elements that are core to Spider-Man are things that you have probably lived through, in some way, shape, or form, minus the costume, right? And so I think the movies that cling to, and there's all those elements in Webb's first Amazing, like Andrew Garfield, to me, I know that people sort of give him the knock of like, he was a little bit too cool for the part. He wasn't the geeky sort of Peter Parker that Tobey Maguire played. He played more outcast type thing. But like that amazing sequence set to that Coldplay song where he's just skateboarding around and grabbing the chains and figuring out how his powers work. Like, these are just things that we would do. They're elements that we would capture. And whenever those movies tap into those beats, and they keep it grounded and they keep it human and they keep it to the place where when we're looking at it, we're like, yeah, that's us. That's when those movies work the best. They lose it a little bit when they go further out, and I think that's kind of where Raimi's third one lost it. That's where I think Amazing Spider-Man 2 lost it. I'm not sure if the Holland ones have lost it just yet. But that's what I think still keeps him as popular as he is.
Mm-hmm.
So you got your book, it's coming out. Do you have a time frame in mind? What do you hope people will draw from your book after they rush out and buy it immediately?
Well, thank you. I hope they do that.
Well, I hope.
You got 2 sales right here.
Thank you. For one thing, I think it'll be a great time capsule for these movies that we love. I think that it'll be a good opportunity to just sort of reconnect with these films. But I also, as a legitimate fan who has adored everything about these movies, I tried to single out the stories that I wanted to know the behind the scenes on them. And so I think the other fans would really want to hear. Like, I have a whole chapter about Shailene Woodley's Mary Jane, and spoke to all the different people to find out like what her involvement would have been and what the scenes were that she shot and how come it didn't work out. And getting to speak with the guy's name was Jeffrey Henderson, was the artist behind the Spider-Man 4. Like, we all see those sketches and everybody sort of sprinkles them around, but I wanted to know what bound them together. To talk about Spider-Man 2 and in that moment, like I wanted to look back at these movies through the lens of, we're an audience now that has been watching these movies for 20 years. So in the moment when people were trying to, like, I think the most fascinating things about Spider-Man 2, because we just accept it now as like this brilliant sequel, this thing that worked really well. But what were the conversations from the team that worked on 1, to go into 2? What were some of their concerns? What were some of the obstacles that they ran into? Did they suddenly have a bunch of confidence from the studio, and how did they parlay it into different things? John Dykstra told me this incredible story about the way that visual effects changed from 1 to 2, but how much Sam still wanted to keep it all very practical. And so the train fight sequence is something that his team went to Chicago because they had access to the loop essentially. And they filmed for 2 days straight to just get exteriors. They didn't yet know what the fight was going to be. Sam had just told them, like, it's going to be on a train, so go capture as much as you can. And it was like December in Chicago, and they were shooting on a train where all the windows had been removed so they could shoot as much practical stuff outside as they can. Then they had to come back and like build that fight sequence from just the stuff that they shot. Like, they were limited to that bit. And I love hearing those stories. Like, those types of stories really, we think that that's one of the greatest action set pieces of all time, but like
Yeah.
when you learn that that came together on a wing and a prayer by people who had no clue what they were doing, blows my mind. And so I hope that the book is filled with a ton of stories like that even the fans who know, like, I know these movies inside and out, I hope I teach you a little bit more.
When do you do you have a kind of a target date right now for when it's coming out?
Yeah, so the manuscript is due in January, and then the one thing I learned from the first book is that the process after the fact takes a really long time, because there's editing and then there's layout and then there's a cover. So right now the date that they have told me is November 1st of 2022.
Okay.
So I say shortly after No Way Home, but it's going to be about a year. The good news is that it'll land hopefully right around the time of Spider-Verse 2, because I think that's October of 2022 if everything holds. And then part of me, the beautiful thing about that is that there's always going to be another Spider-Man movie coming around, so I think each time that something else, another one pops up, whether it's Venom 3 or if we get this Spider-Man Venom crossover, the book will still have another form of life, because people will sort of say like, oh, I want to learn more about the backstories of those movies.
Well, if you're watching the YouTube, we've got the if you see the thumbnail of it at that point, but for those of you watching YouTube, that is the cover of it right now. I think it's very perfect. You got the mask and the film. I definitely like the cover, and especially the font. I think you're spot on with
the
that.
Raimi font. Yes, I know. Seeing my name in that font is great. It's just great. I just selfishly love seeing that.
That's okay. Again, your love of the character. I think what you and I have spoken to offline at that point, but also what you've put out there. I think it's undeniable of your love of the character. Last question. You got 1 minute or less than that at that point. Pitch this book to make people, even though it's coming out in November, why should they continue to follow it and purchase it when it comes out?
Yeah, so this book is for people who, like the three of us, want to do nothing else but sit around and talk about the superhero movies that we love. I truly do think, like the cover says, that this is the golden age of comic book movies. I'm not quite sure if it's going to end. The genre is extremely popular right now, but there's ebbs and flows to every genre. The Westerns probably never thought they were going to go away. I think there's plenty of content, for superhero movies to come. And this movie is absolutely aimed at people who love these types of movies, how they are put together, and quite often put together by people who had no clue what they were doing, and how so many other factors are going against people who just want to make a really good story, like our friend Mark Webb, and other people who didn't get to end on the terms that they wanted to end on, like Sam Raimi. And I tried to explain all the things that happened in a bigger picture show business type way, but really get into the nitty gritty of Spider-Man, because I think he's been one of the most fascinating characters from a superhero standpoint, as being, as we mentioned earlier, one of the only characters who can bridge multiple studios, completely unheard of. You'll never see that again in any way, shape, or form. So the book, if you want to follow it for progress, I have a website. It's called With Great Power Book. You can sign up there, you can subscribe, and I'm going to give periodic updates. Probably share the table of contents sometime soon. As we get a little bit closer, I'll start to share some preview chapters, and just exciting things that are going to be coming through all of next year as I keep you guys informed on it.
Yep, and those are going to be in our show notes. At that point, you've made a third sale. S-Pub says you've definitely convinced me. So.
Mission accomplished.
Well, Brent, do you have any final burning questions at that point you want to know before?
No burning questions. I want to thank you, Sean. Thank you for being so generous with your time. This was great, and I'm like, I could just talk Spider-Man with you for a long time. I could just tell. It's like we definitely need to do this again sometime. Anytime, you're welcome back. Thank you so much.
You guys are awesome. I know. I really appreciate the time, and you guys be well. Talk to you soon.
No, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
All right, bye guys. Bye.
All right. Well, that was a great talk. Yeah, that was a great talk. And thank you again, Sean, for your time. But let us get our second ad break at that point before our sponsors say, why aren't you taking ad breaks at this point? So again, listeners, these ads help keep the lights on the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network. We don't get to choose what ads come on. They can be a bit loud. Give you that 3 count. 3, 2, 1. We'll be right back. Well, again, coming down from that interview, I mean, it was a great time this week for the interview because we only have one real news story. I mean, I know we do have some questions about some rumors flying around at that point. So, Brent and I try to limit certain things of rumors, but, we're glad to talk about them with the listener question segment at that point. But I appreciate the amount of stuff we learned from this book. I was very impressed of how much stuff's out there.
I am excited to get to read this book. You mentioned putting out maybe some samples of some chapters, and I will be very eager to read those. So it's going to be, I think, a really fun book to read. I'm sure there's going to be stuff in it I already know, but I'm looking for those things that are going to expand my knowledge about it. And it's clear from that conversation there would be plenty of that.
Oh yeah, it's definitely. And offline, he will be returning to Marvel Alliance after the book is out, after we've read it, to kind of do a debrief of everything where it's finally out in the open. So.
Yeah, I it's just so obvious. You could just talk Spider-Man with him forever.
Oh yeah.
But you're right. We did get that one big news item this week that we should probably mention.
And so kind of put it out there. You're our business mind of this of this network at that point when it comes to Marvel stuff. So I'm going to let you kind of take the lead on this.
Well, it boils down to we thought the delays were done, but they're not. We have another series of Marvel release date delays for the year 2022. Basically, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness was from coming out in March, is now going to come out May 6, 2022. And oh my goodness, you would think the world ended that day when that news came out. Guys, it's only like 6 weeks or something like that, 6 or 7 weeks. It's not that long. It's under 2 months. Like it'll be fine. It'll be fine. But with that pushing back, that was Thor's date. Well, now Thor's pushing back to what was Black Panther's and Black Panther, and so on down the line. Basically, every movie that has a date, with the exception of Guardians, got pushed back a line. Guardians held its spot, so Ant-Man went from being before Guardians to after Guardians now, which pretty easy for those two not to screw each other up too much, I think. But just everything going a whole week away, and you know what? The official reason given is production delays. Honestly, I believe it. I do believe that. I mean, they have been producing so much. If they need more time to get these things, then by all means. Of course, it's been noted that the Batman movie comes out 3 weeks prior to what was that Doctor Strange original date. And, people like to have fun with it of, Kevin moved the slate because he saw the Batman trailer. I'm like, well, it was a really good trailer, but I'm not quite sure that's quite the reason why. But it was a good trailer. I
mean, even acknowledging Batman, we can't not say, it's full of bumpkin at that point. No, I think there is something to say about it. I think that it's timing in the sense of just after fandom when that trailer comes out. So, they're afraid of it. I think when it comes down to it, you want to have the most amount of time to yourself. And if you can lock down a month like Shang-Chi did at that point, that says something. Like you can own that time period at that point. So, but as you said, even Kevin Feige on the red carpet obviously asked about it. His direct quote to Variety was, it's production shifts and changes. And because we have so many slots, we can just shift slots. So all the Marvel slots are the same. We're just shifting the movies coming out. Strange has moved 6 weeks. So instead of 3 months in between Marvel movies, there are 5 months between Marvel movies. And I think that's something we all can handle. Because again, there's probably at least 1, maybe 2 Disney Plus shows that will keep us occupied during this time period. We don't, hopefully Disney Plus Day in November will give us a kind of window into the first maybe 6 months of Disney Plus on Marvel. But again, I think in more and more rumors, and I can believe it too, if Multiverse of Madness is this even bigger epic than what No Way Home's even going to set us up for, yeah, I want them to get this right. I want them to get the CGI right, and especially with sometimes we get Marvel movies that have an occasional really cringy CGI. They need to get this right.
It's like a video game being delayed. You would rather have it I want it to come out when it's ready. I want it to come out when it's finished. And sure, all jokes aside, the third week of Batman's out, they weren't going to. Doctor Strange was going to take the box office that week. But now Warner Brothers has to be happy because they pretty much have a guaranteed 3 weeks at the top of the box office. And I'm not sure what else is slotted, but I can't imagine anything else is bumping Batman off that early. And you know what? we still have Batman to help fill the gap. We've got this awesome looking Batman movie, so it's like I got Spider-Man in December. And a couple months later, I'm going to see what it sure looks like it's going to be a really cool Batman movie. And then a couple months after that, we'll dive back into a whole ton of Marvel. And I just want to remind everybody, like, how many Marvel projects did we get this year alone for Marvel Studios? It's something like counting up through Spider-Man, it's like 9 projects, right? 5 TV shows, 4 movies. It's unreal the amount of output we had this year. And yeah, maybe if 6 months from now they had known, maybe they would have stretched it a little bit farther, but it's okay. It's not the first time that they've had a big scheduled gap. I mean, the gap from Far From Home to the original Black Widow date was going to be 10 or 11 months. This is still less than that. It's okay. It'll be okay. We will all get through it together. We'll probably have some Star Wars stuff, if nothing else, to also chew on in that time, because you'll have the Book of Boba Fett starting right after Hawkeye.
Yep, exactly. And as Bub said, I'll take 6 weeks over a full year delay, or 18 months at that point. And he says, yes, fear is a tool. Yes. Indeed. Indeed. So again, a light week of news at that point, but I know a number of our listener questions picked up some of the rumor mills at that point, which Brent and I are happy to entertain and discuss at that point. So let us get into some of those many listener questions this week.
Yeah, this first one from Brandon. Thoughts on Wolverine possibly being cast with an indigenous actor in the MCU? I should have gone back and talked to Brandon, because I tried looking to find out if there was a rumor or something of a casting. If there was, I totally missed it. But
same here. I would love to know if he can hit us back offline and find us that. That'd be great.
Because we could just follow up on that next week. But if there's an actor who's an indigenous person for Wolverine, okay. I don't really see where he's not a character whose race really matters, I just don't care. And so okay, great. I just want to know who Wolverine is. I'm not so beholden to the comic book incarnation that, if that kind of thing bothered me, then Hugh Jackman being too tall would bother me. It doesn't. So I'm just ready to see him.
What was it in Pride of the X-Men? Wolverine had an Australian accent, and then we eventually get Hugh Jackman playing.
That's Pride of the X-Men. I got the VHS tape over there, actually. Yes, I love Pride of the X-Men, including Wolverine. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's one of those things that Travis and I have debated when he co-hosted with me, or very early on in the show, talk about X-Men and our theories for Wolverine. You and I have debated this. We've all debated this at this point. I want to say, I'll put this question back when it comes to an actor. I'm not asking us to fan cast. Do they get a name, or do we go what typically has become the James Bond route and go a up and comer, or someone that is not as well known, but has people say, oh, that guy. Daniel Craig wasn't completely unknown. Hugh Jackman wasn't completely unknown, but they were not the mega stars that they became.
There are some characters who you probably want a name to help bolster interest in the character. The Eternals cast, right? Nobody knows who the Eternals is. They just made an Eternals movie and they still don't know who the Eternals is. But you get names like Angelina Jolie to come in because she is a name who will draw attention, right? Wolverine is not one of these characters. You don't need a name to draw the attention of Wolverine. So I'm going to go with the up-and-comer and say I feel like that's probably the better route to go. Get someone from a business standpoint, get someone you can lock in on several appearances, cheaper than what a name actor is going to command salary-wise, but just get somebody who's younger, who maybe isn't as jaded. And no, maybe they won't be as experienced, but you can work with that. And to me, for these bigger characters, I would prefer smaller characters, and putting a name in them is a little more interesting, I think.
Yeah.
For someone like Wolverine, Wolverine is one of the biggest Marvel characters. You don't need a name.
Yeah, it's almost in the sense of, it's a double-edged sword, when you're trying to follow anyone following Hugh Jackman, but let alone someone who is not a name, saying, how can I follow in the league? And it's just reminding him, saying, he wasn't as big of a name at that time. He became this in league of what he did for the character and who he became. Travis Hines in the chat saying no mega stars for Wolverine. S-Bub saying Wolverine will bring fame to the actor, not the other way around. Yeah, I think, yeah. And so I'm on the same league. I want an unknown or someone that is not as well known. We don't need a mega star for that. And I love your idea of bring the mega stars to the supporting cast, not the ones that are up front. That would be interesting. So, who we got next?
Travis Sinnell.
There we go.
He says, Brent, what MCU character would look best with leg belt? You know, I was thinking about this, and eventually I settled on Hawkeye. Both of them, just one of the Hawkeyes. You know, a nice little leg belt action. For anyone who doesn't know, it's just a reference of me and Tim from the Beer with Geeks. We got in this long back and forth thread one time about leg belt, posting all these characters from the 90s like Superboy and the Scarlet Spider, and just belts around legs for seemingly no reason. And it just became this thing.
The Rob Liefeld of everyone loves it.
Yeah. But obviously the real answer would be the day the Scarlet Spider costume is debuted, that would be the best with leg belt. But for existing characters, I'm going to go ahead and say Kate Bishop / Clint Barton, those two.
Okay. Yeah.
And then
I'm not the bit, again, I'm not against leg belts, but we all know how much leg belts you are. So I have no opinion on it.
It's 90s at its finest.
Yeah.
And then he says, Chris, we know where Brent stands. Who are you more excited for? And he said Far From Home, but he means No Way Home. The Daredevil potential appearances or the other Spider-Man.
And there's this other thing trying to make the rounds in the sense of Daredevil. And I'm a huge Daredevil fan. I am like you. I'm waiting for that eventual, because it will happen. It will happen. We will get Daredevil and Spider-Man team up at some point, whether it be in this film or in a future incarnation at that point. Because we're in this business of kind of knowing, we delve in the rumor stuff. We kind of know certain things more than the general audience at that point. I think for me, the 3 Spider-Man being on the screen together will give me, taking me back to when I first saw Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man in the theater, taking me back. Like, you heard Sean so many times, he's getting goosebumps just thinking about certain things. I'm not saying I'm not going to leap out of my seat claiming, oh, F yeah, Daredevil's in it, because that's freaking awesome. But just having that idea of all 3 of our legacy Spider-Man together on one screen, I don't care if it's for 1 minute, 30 seconds. I have that moment. You're never going to take that away from me once that happens. And I think that's kind of where I stand, the 3 Spider-Man.
You want that hero shot. You want that pose, the 3 of them together on screen. Yeah, it's going to be remarkable.
Well, yeah, Daredevil is for you at that point, but
It is like seeing Spider-Man and Daredevil together in costume, which I don't think is this movie. I think it's just Matt Murdock.
No, I don't either.
But that's step 1. You got to get him. You got to get him in. I just want Daredevil back. Period. He's pretty much my second favorite Marvel character. And in fact, just today I got a Daredevil pop sucker that's on the back of my phone right now.
There you go.
I love that character. Next up from Anthony, if you had to revive Cloak and Dagger, Runaways, or The Gifted, which show would it be? And was which show would it be, and would you want it in the MCU?
Yeah.
Did you watch these shows?
I saw a couple of episodes of season 1 of Runaways. I never got into Cloak and Dagger, but I did watch all of The Gifted.
Okay,
because again, the X-Men.
The X-Men. I saw the first season of The Gifted, and then I don't really know why. I saw like 1 episode of season 2, and I just fell off of it, ran out of time, and never went. By the time I was maybe ready to go back and catch up, it had been canceled. But I did see all of the Runaways, and I did see all of Cloak and Dagger.
Okay.
Cloak and Dagger, a little bit of a rocky start, but they got to somewhere that worked for what they wanted to be. Ultimately, though, of these shows, with what I saw of them all, I like the Runaways the best. So I would say that one. Worth noting, Cloak and Dagger and the Runaways, regardless of what MCU status canon, they are truly canon together, because Cloak and Dagger appeared in an episode of Runaways. And that was really cool to get to see those characters together. Would I bring them back and set them in the MCU? Yeah. I mean, overall, I would. I don't think it really... I've never been opposed to these shows being a part of it. I just don't think they were. So I'm fine with that.
I think one of the reasons I fell off the Runaways, it just didn't capture me as much as I remember loving the comic. And
the comic was absolutely the better version.
I know where they were going. I think they did an okay job. It just wasn't grabbing me. And so when hearing Cloak and Dagger coming on at that point, I said, okay, I like the characters, but it's kind of in the same league of that. And so I never took interest. Again, X-Men being The Gifted and Fox, I was like, okay, you got my interest being the X-Men. I think the problem with that show is almost they said this whole idea of this event that happened that took out most of the X-Men at that point, and I just watched it to a point of just saying, okay, this is the closest I've got to X-Men on TV. I'm watching it. I didn't really enjoy it as much, but it was the
Sure.
closest thing I've got for X-Men on TV. But bringing the shows back, I don't think the gift has a chance just because we're getting X-Men proper. I think you can change that show into a different idea if you wanted to do kind of an Age of Apocalypse kind of thing at that point. But I think if anything, Runaways, Cloak and Dagger have a better shot, but I think we are a long ways away from seeing them put into the MCU.
Honestly, I don't think we'll see those interpretations of any of those shows again.
Yeah, I mean, and that's and
I feel like
it
there's
is,
a
yeah.
world where we could see some Netflix characters. You know, there's a world where we could even see some Agents of Shield people. Maybe.
Mhm.
I don't think these three. They never really had the impact I feel would be needed to bring them back.
Well, especially when if our theories and what Marvel is dropping not so subtle hints on, when you have the idea of a young Avengers / champions compared to the Runaways, who are you going to choose? It's just simple economics and popularity.
I mean, yeah, that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah.
All right, from Dookie, this would be the rumor that we
Yep.
have talked about whether or not it was worth including. Well, we get to have our cake and eat it too here.
Yeah.
With the World War Hulk rumor swirling, who would y'all put on the MCU's Illuminati? Interesting question.
Yeah.
Worth noting, it'd be very different because I don't think I don't see them shooting Hulk off into space. They already did that part of the story. And it's also worth noting, as far as we know, officially Universal still has distribution rights for this movie. But there were rumors several months ago that those behind closed doors that situation may have been handled. Some money may have exchanged hands and it may have been handled. So I don't know. The MCU's Illuminati, that's tough.
Well, going back to that at that point, I mean, there's nothing been ever officially confirmed. Like I remember Cosmic Circus Liz kind of put back a story that I think she had talked to a producer that was kind of saying how much behind the scenes stuff. So I mean, it's going to be interesting why, if this did happen, they quietly got it back. Why are they being so? I understand kind of why they're being so quiet about it in the sense of their plans, but it's just interesting for something that they kept a deal like this could be this quiet.
Well, I'd keep it quiet if I was.
No, I get why.
So,
I'm just saying it's more impressive that if it has happened, that they've kept it quiet this long.
Yeah, absolutely. So the MCU's Illuminati. This is tough because several people that first came to mind, I'm like, well, they're gone, they're dead, or whatever, you know. So it's like
they don't exist yet.
I mean, let's go with the obvious one, Doctor Strange, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he's in the MCU, and this is where it's like, can I put Tony Stark in it? Well, probably not because he's dead. Can I put Reed Richards in it? Well, he's not here yet, so I don't know. Who else should we put in this Illuminati for the MCU?
Of currently at this point, like you said, Doctor Strange is one. Hopefully he makes it out of Multiverse of Madness at that point. I would say we get Sam Wilson. We've had Captain America as being part of Lumen. I think he is the one you have to have a Cap or a Cap-like person, and why not have Sam? Because I think he brings the best of who Steve was and brings a different sense of the reality of the situation of what the world is like. I think that speech at the end of Falcon Winter Soldier proves why he needs to be on that team.
I'm gonna go with Hank Pym. I think we need some big brains and
an attitude to kill.
I mean, that fits. If you look at the Illuminati, they had plenty of attitude with them.
Yeah.
But I think they need some big brains. And the comics Illuminati, you had Reed, you had Tony. Well, neither of them are options, right?
What about Shuri?
I thought about Shuri, but that's not who I would pick from Wakanda. But I'm gonna go with Hank Pym. Do you like Shuri? You going with Shuri?
If we're going for brains at that point, Black Panther
she definitely gets the brains.
Yeah, with rumors swirling, is she going to take over the mantle, things like that? The character itself, I think, without a Tony Stark, and I think my only reason I like Hank on it, and I think you need to have the kind of character of just being a Joe a-hole on it too, because we don't have
Accomplished.
we don't have a Namor in this existence yet in the
Right.
MCU. So we need someone to be that pompous jerk on the squad, to be the uppity person, but also someone with the baggage of what he has seen and done at that point, and being
Sure.
part of Shield and being on the outside. But I think Shuri should be on it. Just being the big tech genius that has access to just this amazing technology.
Yeah, not a bad pick. I mean, totally understandable. I had thought of Okoye primarily because in Avengers Endgame,
Yeah.
she was like the representative. Now, of course,
Yeah.
we know Shuri was snapped, but she was like the representative from Wakanda. And I do think Wakanda should absolutely be there. Somebody right now is thinking about the Inhumans TV show and saying, what about Black Bolt? No,
Stop it.
no.
No. It's going to be interesting just because, neither one of us have seen Eternals. So we might have a different opinion of maybe one of the Eternals being on this team, but, we're going on right now.
Yeah. The last person I could think of would have been Vision if he had survived Infinity War, or if like the Vision from WandaVision had survived somehow. But with his current status as the White Vision, right? It's like we don't know where he's at mentally.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is so tough.
It is. It is a very good question. And I said, like before, I said, okay, I've got to devote at least 10, 15 minutes to kind of think who I did. Well, that didn't happen.
You know what? Screw it. Katie from Shang-Chi. That's who it is.
Oh.
That's who it is
okay.
right there. Katie from Shang-Chi. She's going to bring her bow and arrow, and that's who's joining the Illuminati.
My other pick would be Captain Marvel.
Yeah, I thought about her. And I don't think that's a bad one at all.
Yeah.
Actually, all seriousness, what about Loki?
Yeah, that's
the television Loki, like the 2012 Loki.
I'm gonna do one about. Let's do Crokey. Crokey.
Absolutely. You know what? Done. I think we can put a pin in this one.
There we go. All right. We got one more.
Yeah, Jim Scroggs came at us with a couple. With spoilers going around for Eternals, should Marvel crack down on what's shown at the premiere? I understand if it's in the movie, it's fair game, but what if it's a credit scene? Should those scenes be left out until the release date? What I think, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure spawned this question was basically, was it Variety or someone?
Yeah, it was Variety.
Full on posted the credit scenes for the Eternals. Thankfully, I haven't seen it yet. Do not send it to me, please. Don't. We don't want any part of it. Don't say anything. Don't even allude to it.
Brent and I, and Brent is very notable for his blocks and his mutes at this point. I basically have, for the first time ever, had to go on a very big blocking and muting spree that day.
And unfortunately, I know Jim saw at least part of it because we talked about it, but we talked about him having seen part of it. We did not talk about what it actually was. Let me be very clear. Yes. And wasn't there something today about the Ghostbusters?
Yeah. Katie had put in our chat that someone had put out. I think someone on Yahoo had said, "What does the post-credit scene mean in Ghostbusters?" The only thing I had seen, I think it was from Daniel RPK, saying there was going to be more Ghostbusters sequels. Well, I was like, of course, if this movie is going to be successful in any way, shape, or form. I wasn't thinking there's going to be a post-credit scene, but these days we kind of assume in the geek genre of movies, you just kind of assume there's going to be one. Big surprise for those of you who are seeing Dune. Demi does not believe in post-credits, so don't stay for Dune. But there will be sequels. They are guaranteeing that.
Maybe, depending on how this one performs.
And with Variety, this was a person that I've heard enough people of cast I listen to, articles I read that I trust that don't spoil. This was someone that this is not their first time in the sense of being these premieres. They understand and they're not supposed to be doing this and do it anyways. I think that I agree. I think Marvel should, but it's hard when you come down to, okay, you can ostracize that one person, but you can't ostracize Variety. You just can't at that point. So they may take out the person not being invited again or being punished, but that someone else is going to have to put on that beat.
I mean, I tend to agree with that. it's hard because like my gut reaction is like, yeah, you know what? If it's an advanced screening, take off the credit scene. Take them
Yeah.
off. Take them out of there entirely. On the other side, Sony just very effectively used there's a credit scene. Please don't spoil the credit scene. They made a big deal out of it. Very effectively used that to help drive Venom sales, to help drive Venom tickets. And so it personally, yeah, I'm like, get rid of the credit scenes. But from a marketing standpoint, I kind of get why you would want to leave them in.
Yeah, it's one of those things because again, they want that thing, and as Bob's, you're right. I think it was the writer's Twitter. I think his Twitter, his or her, I can't remember who it was. I know it was someone from Variety, and I think it was through their Twitter. They were literally live tweeting stuff. So,
well, even then, unfortunately for Variety, they still take the brunt of it because, as everyone knows, you work in education, you know, like you still represent your company, and so even if it's under your name, you still represent your company. Sure, you can say, "Oh, the views sharing here don't reflect those of my employer." I don't know. I don't think it works so well.
Yeah, if you watch both our Twitter feeds and stuff like that, we're not necessarily the ones to court controversy.
All right. So Jim's other question, very interesting question that I have never thought about before. Would you want to be in a test audience for an MCU, knowing it isn't the final product? So they have their test screenings, their early ones, which are usually just like friends and family. You get an invite to one of those. Are you going? Do you want one of those?
I do. I'm just going to be selfish. I would love being a part of that. And yes, it's going to be one of those hard things that I can't talk about, but you were able to do it. I mean, you weren't necessarily
that
part
wasn't
of
a test
No,
audience.
not test audience, but a very early screening. I mean, a really early screening at that point. I would love being it. And yes, it would be tough, but it would be cool just getting some feedback, even though depending on what stage they're at that point to see this. Yeah, I would obviously kill to see, not literally, but to see No Way Home, or any of this stuff.
It's interesting because like it'd be kind of amazing to know, like, if you're in a test audience, they are going to look at your feedback and it may influence the movie going forward.
Yeah.
Like you could say something that does influence. The answer to the question is yes, but with an asterisk. You mentioned like you'd be at game for it for No Way Home, right? I wouldn't be for No Way Home. I don't want to see an early incomplete version of No Way Home. I want to see the movie. But a Marvel property that was smaller, that was less important to me, I'll just use Eternals as an example. Like, I'm excited to see the movie. I'm really excited to see the movie, but this is not a property nearly as important to me as Spider-Man. So I would much prefer we're going to let you test audience one of two movies. Which one isn't? I'd actually go with Eternals, I think, because I would want the surprises and the fun and of like getting to see Spider-Man No Way Home in its finished final form. But at the same time, if I was told you can see it, it's not what I'd pick, but I'm not going to turn it down either. I mean, let's be honest. I'm never going to turn it down.
I want that feather in my cap again. If someone's going to give me a chance to see going out to Hollywood to see the world premiere of something like that, yeah, I'm going.
Yeah. Oh, world premiere. That's the final movie.
Yeah,
minus the credit scene maybe, but that's the final movie. Yes, I would never turn one of those down.
Yeah, exactly. S-Bubs, how much can we bet that Morbius will be marketed the same way as Venom 2? Absolutely.
I don't know. I mean, what do you mean by marketed the same way? Like Morbius, Venom 2 had a built-in audience from Venom 1. And Venom 2 had what we now know was a really fascinating credit scene that has massive implications. Can they do it again with Morbius twice in a row? I mean, I get why the MCU would play ball with Venom, but with Morbius, I don't know. I think I'd almost compare the Morbius marketing more to Venom 1, which I think was very successful. But I will be shocked if Jared Leto, there's video of Jared Leto saying, please don't spoil the credit scene for this movie you're about to see.
Remember, Morbius is going to be on the Avengers and going to save the multiverse.
That's right.
It is. He already said. I think Sony's marketing obviously is suspect at times, and they do a lot of it, but it's not necessarily the best.
No, but I mean, can anyone deny like they pulled it off for Venom?
Oh yeah,
They
yeah,
pulled it up.
they did,
So
but again, like you said, it's a built-in audience at that
yeah,
point. So, but even when going back to selling Venom, again, Morbius is not a character a lot of people know. And Venom is one of those that I think people tangentially know of Venom from Spider-Man. They don't
they
know a
do. They
lot.
absolutely.
And so Morbius outside, oh, it's a vampire movie, but he's Marvel. Okay, interesting. They've got that kind of intriguing idea because they will throw
Yeah.
that Marvel in association with Marvel all over the place to get people interested.
Oh yeah, for sure. But vampires are still pretty popular,
As
and
long as
so
as long as they're not glistening or whatever
yeah,
like that.
yeah. No
Sorry.
sparkle, no sparkles. But
Sorry.
other than that, the vampires are still a big deal. I
We've
don't
lost
know.
all our Twilight fans. I'm sorry, guys, but no.
That's fine. You like Travis Snell, to be clear. I don't. I like the Morbius trailer. I'm still like I'm interested to see you. I have more questions now, but
Yes,
I'm
we
like
do.
thinking about it realistically. Feels like right now all we do is talk about when's the next trailer. We are probably close to when another trailer for that movie would happen, right? Like you got to think one would be attached to Spider-Man No Way Home.
Yeah, I would say that, but I would say that's got to be, because it's coming out in January. So
Yeah.
I think if we're not getting one next week to just tie into Halloween and things like that, it's going to come out in November. To wait until December to have a technical second trailer is a pretty big delay.
Spider-Man can get away with it. I don't know about Venom. There are all these rumors going around that the 25th of October was going to be like the Spider-Man No Way Home poster, the Spider-Man No Way Home second trailer, right? Watch it all be Morbius. Watch it like it's kind of true, but it'll be Morbius.
Yep.
Part of me almost hopes that's the case. That'd be so much fun.
And again, a lot of those rumors have been debunked. Daniel RPK, even Sean saying, they're not. It's probably going to be sometime in November, which is what we're all expecting. But all right, we're going to take our final ad break before we get in Fact or Fictions and get into Hawkeye. So as we say, listeners, as always, these are ads. They help support us. Thank you very much, ads. And here's their 3 count. 3, 2, 1. We'll be right back. All right, so I've got the Fact or Fiction from Mr. Snell pulled up. Number 1, Spider-Verse 2 will go into 2 pre-existing Spider-Man universes. 92% said fact. 48% said math does not work with that one. 8% said fiction. So I think with the way the title went with the supposed title, Spider-Verse 2, I think that's almost a guarantee. Number 2, we will see a live action Spider-Man 2099 before Ben Reilly. 79% said fact, 21% said fiction. They're people after my own heart, I know, but also part of the heart is breaking because of Ben Reilly, because I also want that too. And then number 3, on Disney Plus Day, 4 or more new Marvel Studios Disney Plus shows will be announced. 63% said fact, 37% said fiction. I think both of us were fact on that one just because of 4. I think 3, yes. I think 4 is interesting.
Okay, so my turn this week, right?
Yep, your turn.
All right, first up, by the end of 2022, the Marvel Studios fanfare will have scenes from the Disney Plus shows in it.
So say it one more time.
By the end of next year, by the end of 2022, the Marvel Studios fanfare at the beginning with the logo where you got all the characters going across names will have scenes from Disney Plus properties.
I say fact on that one. I think we will still have some of the key sequences. I still think Tony snapping, I think that's going to still be, and I think there'll still be those from the original 3 phases. But yeah, they're going to start integrating Disney Plus and the rest of Phase 4 into it. I think it's just now what would be cool if they do What If in there, even just one thing of What If. I'm going to be on the lookout for that.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
I'm still, part of me is like, why didn't they do the Marvel Studios fanfare for What If with animated character? Like, I just think that would have been cool.
Again, talking to marketing, come on.
I do ultimately think this one is a fact. I think they're going to want to include those. It would not surprise me if it happened as early as Doctor Strange, throw something from WandaVision in there, for example. I do. All right. So I'm a fact on that. All right. On Disney Plus Day, we will find out that at least 2 of the live action Spider-Man movies are coming to Disney Plus before No Way Home?
I want it, and we're both expecting. We've seen enough leaks, whether they're to believe or not, that they're testing some of this idea. So, sure, I think if they want to make a big splash, we haven't heard how long this the future of Marvel, the MCU featurette's going to be. That's supposed to premiere that day, but yeah, I'm gonna go fact because my heart wants it. I'm gonna go with my heart on this one.
I'm twisted on this one. I'm conflicted, if you will. I do think it's going to happen. I just don't know if they're going to announce movies distributed by Sony on Disney Plus Day. So I'm gonna go ahead and say fiction on this because I think they're going to want to truly leave it to Disney content.
True, yeah, you're
But
right.
if my question was it'll just happen, I would say fact, but it's not. I'm specifically putting myself in this spot by saying on Disney Plus Day.
Yeah. But it technically would be Disney. It's on Disney Plus, so that's where I will.
It's still like properties that would draw towards it. Yeah, it is. So I'm both. You know what? I'll go ahead and go with fact solely because I do think it's going to happen, and it would be a selling point. And I said at least two, thinking Homecoming and Far From Home. I actually think it's quite possible that we're going to get the Maguire movies, the Garfield. Like it's possible we'll get all 7 of them.
Yeah. As Bub saying, Black Panther using kinetic energy will stay as the last thing shown in the fanfare. I just feel it. Yeah. Hey, I'll take it.
I will accept that answer.
Mm-hmm.
All right, final one. The big one. It's not that big, but it's the big one. Uncle Ben will be directly mentioned or referenced in Spider-Man No Way Home.
I say fact. I think they'd have to be some special kind of living under a rock in that production team. Anyone on there that hasn't had it, I think I'm going to say fact because I just want it. I think it'll be a unfortunate thing that we go through this first trilogy with Tom Holland without getting a proper reference in in this series. So I'm going to go fact.
Yeah, and I say direct because I know there's been more indirect references already. So that's why. And I do think it's a fact on this one as well. It's time. I completely support moving away from that, especially having rewatched all the previous movies in a short time span. It's like, man, like 4 out of 5 of those really hammers home Uncle Ben. But it's time. It is time. Of course, and they've already acknowledged it in What If, because you got a reference to Uncle Ben and What If. So I think it'll happen. I think within a couple months we will have heard Uncle Ben in a live action MCU project.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, I will post those on Sunday, and yeah. So we'll see what all the listeners have. All right. Let us get into our new comic book club, Hawkeye, by Matt Fraction and David Aja. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
I believe you are.
Yep, I think so. But this is probably my second time reading it, and one thing I want to say right off the bat, I absolutely love the colors in this book. I mean, I love Aha's pencil with it, but Hollingsworth's coloring of this, I love this style. I think it really works for this series.
Yeah, it's a more simple style. It's not like super detailed, but it's just really pleasant to look at. Like the way he did it. I love the transitions between, like, you'll see a shot of like Clint getting punched or whatever, and it knocks his head back, and then they'll cut to a thing of him sleeping and his head is laying the same way. Like he does that several times throughout these issues, and I really, really like those transitions, the way they did that. Yeah, like this art style, like it's not a typical style that I am normally gravitate towards, but it really worked for me in these issues.
Yeah, and I think what both of us, at least I was doing, I'm almost hoping, I'm assuming you did, or we will be doing throughout as we read this, is thinking about those basically 1.5 trailers we've gotten, is picking up the callbacks to that are already coming from this story.
Right.
I mean, just the first one alone in the first page is him using the bow to swing across, and it snaps and he goes down.
Mm-hmm.
So that's they do that in the trailer. The the Avenger going to the party and things like that. So I mean, it's fun, and that's why we wanted to do this, just to say like, okay, we can have direct references to this as we read through.
Yeah, again, I've read parts of this. I've never finished the whole series, and I genuinely don't remember why. But I'm excited to read it, and I'm finishing the whole series this time. And yeah, you definitely have those references. I love the Kate Bishop dynamic, and obviously it's different. This Kate Bishop has been around. She's had some experiences with the Young Avengers already, but I really do appreciate. Like he even references like calling her like one of the greatest archers, like or possibly the greatest archer, right? And I'm like, oh, that's kind of funny because in the trailer she refers to herself as the greatest archer alive.
And says, "Are one of those people you?"
Yep.
But you're right. This is where this series kind of like you said, this Kate Bishop's been around for a while, has had a long history. But the first issue kind of sets up a very kind of snarky Clint at that point. We've gotten hints of that throughout like his time with the Avengers and things like that, but getting a whole series, I think we're gonna really dig deep into the snark of Clint and how he don't give anything. He will let you know what he thinks and not care.
Yeah, I think these two issues did a really great job of setting up the dynamic with these two characters, and just it's going to be a blast both for the remainder of the series and in the show. I think to really see Kate Bishop and Clint Barton just play off of each other, bounce off of each other, both with sarcastic quips to awesome action set pieces where his hands are tied and he just yells her name, holds his hands up, and she shoots him with an arrow to release him. It's going to be a lot of fun stuff, I think, with this series.
And what I particularly liked in that second issue is, and I hope they deal with a little bit more, even though we only have 6 episodes, we don't know how long the episodes are going to be, but delving into more of Clint's backstory, because we really, outside of his interactions with Natasha, we don't have a lot of backstory on Clint in the MCU.
Don't know. It's definitely an area that there is a ton of room to give us more. And we know we're probably going to get some of the backstory of his time as Ronin. It'd be nice. Yep. Yes. Like, and I realize like this comic, like this book won't necessarily influence that, but like, where's the stuff with his family and more on them? We've just seen them relatively a little bit. So, but I think these two issues are off to a strong start. Strong writing, like I said, really just, it's an art style that it is working for me. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, so we will read issues 3 and 4 next week. And but yeah, so this was a great episode. I think all our episodes are great, but this one was particularly entertaining in the sense of, again, thanking Sean for coming on and being, and again, it's one of those things that his book is not out. And so, he did give us purview. He did not want the questions. He said, ask me anything. If I can't talk about something, if I don't feel like I can, there was not one thing he did not answer, and put out a lot of information that I didn't think that, he was good. But I think that if hopefully y'all will give it a chance at that point and kind of follow him, we'll put it in the show notes at that point. Go to his Twitter, subscribe to that stuff. He's already put out one newsletter for it at that point and gave some information. So it's going to be fun. So again, I want to thank him for taking the time to come on.
Absolutely. Definitely that. It was definitely a treat to get to talk with him. I've been following him for a while. When I found out this is what his next book was, I was obviously really excited.
And one question I did not ask on air, because I asked it, he kind of said it off air. Since he has written basically 2 books back to back at this point, he is taking a long break before he even attempts a third. He said the third is out there, but both of these books have taken a good long while to research and build up. So I think he will more than earn a break. But one thing I want to make sure we plug, and we got into it because I know Sean's time was limited. So our charity stream, for Geekverse, is coming up in 2 weeks. At that point, November 6th. November 6th. Yep, November 6th. So as announced, Brent is on Team Wolf with Travis. We've got some more announcements coming and have every day. Check out the Geekverse feeds for who is joining Clay's team. who are some new hosts. I think that we still don't have a final announcement on the DC host at that point. So
I don't think so. If
Nope,
we do,
not-
I missed it.
Nope. I've asked. I'll give a little thing at that point. The questions for Marvel will be 20 Marvel movies, 10 TV shows, and I have been giving full purview by the rules committee to choose any of anything. It's not just going to be MCU.
Sure. Well, because there's not that many MCU TV shows. Oh,
No. Whoa.
Here come the Cloak and Dagger questions.
oh boy. Those gifted questions are going to be humdingers. I'm going to tell you right now.
I will struggle with those.
Yep.
Polaris was in it, and
but yeah, I'm started to work on a few. I've been spitballing a few and writing down as they come to me. But I think the weekend before is when I'm going to start digging deep into it at that point. But I'm going to have a lot of fun. So, but yeah, check out it. And again, I don't know if they premiered. I know last year they did allow you to pledge early at that point. But again, going to a great cause.
You can.
Yep. Okay, good.
It's already live.
Yep. So check that out if you want to pledge early at that point. Again, going to a great cause, the Children's Hospital. It's going to be a good time. So, all right. So let's bring this episode to a close. Let's bring this plane down. Tell everyone how they can follow you. Brandon, plug your show.
Bring this plane down. I don't like how you phrase that.
Okay. Let's land the plane safely to the gate and taxi into the gate. How's that? Better?
All right, I'll go with that.
Okay.
Yeah, Brentech Prime on Twitter. Next episode of Fans Without Borders is going to as of right now, I've gotten the notes primarily fandom stuff. After speaking with Ray, we'll decide how much we want to go into the Ruby Rose fiasco, which that's all I can call it right now. But definitely we're going to talk some fandom because, there were some cool trailers there and we're going to talk about them. So check out Fans Without Borders and Brentech Prime on Twitter.
Yep, definitely. And you can follow me on Twitter at Chris Balga. You can email the show at marvelalliancepodcast@gmail.com. You can follow the show on Twitter at Marvel A Podcast. You can follow the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network at GUA Pod Network. Again, want to make sure we plug both our sponsors. We got to make sure to do that at that point. Organicpricebooks.com. Again, use that code MarvelGUA at checkout for $2 off every single order. And our newest sponsor for this month is Manscaped, 20% off if you use the code GUAPOD with free shipping for all your manscaping needs. It's going to be fun this month, Brent. Especially when it's our week to do a plug for Manscaped. I can't wait.
That's right.
So, all right. And again, if you want to provide feedback, ask questions, DMs are open. Feel free to tweet at us at that point. Continue to rate and review the Marvel Alliance solo feed on Apple Podcasts and GUA feed on Apple Podcasts, whichever podcatcher of choice may be. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for joining us in the chat with the interview. And beyond that, stay safe out there, everyone. And as Stan the Man would say, Excelsior, true believers. Brent, you and I had a very special package coming in the mail, and it wasn't from Manscaped.
No, it wasn't. It's this massive 2-volume set. The story of Marvel Studios, the making of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah.
Ordered a long time ago, and I've been eagerly awaiting this one. I briefly skimmed through it, just flipping through some of the pages.
You did more than that. You've read a chapter.
And then I've read a chapter, and I'm like, there's a lot in here. There's already just, I'm going to love reading this book. I love this thing. It was expensive. Yes. Worth every penny. Yes.
Yeah. And that's one of those things. I had pre-ordered this, and the great thing about Amazon pre-orders, you don't have to commit anything at that point. If you want to cancel, you can cancel without any threat. But I think it was one weekend I said, hey, it's going down in price. Have you pre-ordered this yet? He said, well,
I hadn't yet. And I was thinking back, and I'm looking through text messages. And I'm like, wait a minute. I remember talking to my wife about this, man, putting this out there for a potential birthday thing. Well, that birthday came and went with no mention of it. So I'm like, okay, well then I'm doing it. I'm we're asking forgiveness first or forgiveness later, and thankfully she understood. And it's going to take me a long time to get through it, but I do intend to read every single page.
Oh yeah. And I think with even flipping through it, the last couple of nights, just while Aaron is watching The Bachelorette at times, which she doesn't need my snarky commentary on that, so she was happy that I was at least reading something that would avoid that. But the idea, the amount of not just some of the quick stories I read from behind the scenes, which is what you and I love talking about this kind of stuff of that, but just the the sketches of plans for what they had, the title cards, the posters that have never seen the light of day, the test footage of when they're trying out for, the parts at that point. I mean, this book, I mean, even at the end, the big 10-year Marvel MCU cast and cast photo and main players. I mean, they did a lot of work, and as Sean brought up, some stories probably Feige didn't want to tell because they're in this book, and the author has been very active as late, and even retweeting us and thanking us for buying it at that point. Even though I wasn't a follower, she somehow was catching up on stuff. But there is a lot of heart in the stories, and you see that the beginning of the studio and where it's come is just simply amazing.
It is, and the access that they reference having an office on at Marvel Studios. So they have quotes in interviews with, seemingly everybody, right? So
Yeah.
it just seems like everybody. And I did read that. I haven't gotten to this point yet, but they did get some time with Chadwick Boseman before he passed. So we will fortunately get to at least see some of his words again and see some stuff that he had to say. And I'm excited for that. I fought the temptation to jump to when Spider-Man joined. No, I'm going to let this story play out. And I got through chapter 1. Now I'm I'm ready for chapter 2. I'm too tired tonight. I won't properly enjoy it. But this weekend, I'm definitely going to read some more.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of homework to do for World's Finest, and then a book club I'm involved in reading. What is it? Something's Killing the Children. But I'm gonna work this, and I'm on daddy duty this week, and Aaron is going away for a girls' weekend. So I think I can sneak in chapter 1 during that time as well.
Yeah, but it's a lot to it. You won't get through it as fast as you will a comic book.
No.
But what a fun episode. All these books on this history and stuff, the Spider-Man from Sean, and then this, and just the Marvel Cinematic Universes.
Yeah.
I love it. Love it.
Yep. So again, it is an expensive book. I think right now it's, a little under $150 at that point. But if you are as big of a Marvel fan as Brent and I are, and you kind of dig the stuff, look into it, it's definitely, even just on a quick read through, it's skimming. It's been worth every penny. So, but yeah, so thank you all for joining us for the end credits, and we will see you next week. Bye.